Sounds of Blackness journey by way of the beginnings of Gary Hines' journey. While I'm a longtime resident of the Twin Cities here, I'm also a proud native of Yonkers, New York. My great mother, the late great Doris Hines, world-renowned, always brought us up steeped in the culture. As my mother rehearsed to do her worldwide tours, in the house we would hear the music of Sarah and Ella and Duke and Nat, who also would come to her shows and would call the house, and we'd get so excited. Maya Angelou, Mom, Miss Maya's on the phone. And so all of that richness was there. My brothers and I always loved the drums. And so we would beat on pots and pans in the house. Now, most parents would have said, give me that noise now, okay? But not Doris Hines. She encouraged us and enrolled us into the local all-black drum corps, the Samuel H. Dow American Legion number 1017, named after the first African-American from Yonkers to die in World War I, Samuel H. Dow. And we learned our drum lessons there. And I had my set of bongos, my first instrument from, as Prince would say, the secondhand store. Back in New York, we called it the junk man, but they were a good set of bongos. So all of that music was there, all that rhythm foundation is there, and you can still hear it today in Sounds of Blackness arrangements and recordings, that rhythm heavy, that world beat, that Afrocentricity at the core of it. And of course, that started back in Yonkers, New York. Hines family relocated from Yonkers to Minneapolis in the early 60s. There were a number of things. First of all, it was like moving to another planet at the time, going from New York to Minneapolis. But one of the things that we quickly found out is that while the black community here was very small percentage-wise, especially in terms of what we were used to being immersed in New York, it was very active and very cultural-centric, very Afrocentric. And there were talented groups here and individuals, all different genres, jazz, blues, gospel. There were R&B groups here who would have rivaled any Motown group. Names like Showtime Part 1 and 2, the Philadelphia Story. It goes on and on and on. Maurice McGinnis and the Blazers. They were all here, and they would have rivaled any of those groups. And so we found that to be, but also, of course, again, that's how we got here. Mom being in the active jazz scene here, with so many jazz giants that were based here. And also in gospel and blues, all of that music was happening despite how small the African-American population was here in the Twin Cities. And what we observed is that when that's the case, either you get absorbed by the overall culture or you cleave unto your own. And the latter clearly happened here, which is why we had a thriving Rondo community and why we had a thriving South Side and North Side black community before urban renewal and the freeways. When we said back in the day, urban renewal meant Negro removal. And so our neighborhoods were disrupted. And of course, when 1967 happened and Plymouth Avenue burned down in reaction, much the same way that Minneapolis burned decades later after George Floyd's lynching, all of those inequities and injustices that were festering, smoldering under what appeared to be a calm surface exploded. And so that's why it's not a surprise that resurfaced, because those underlying causes were never really fully addressed and rectified. But at the time, between the Way Community Center and Spike Moss and Vusi Zulu, Natanda Zulu, just always orienting us towards our African heritage and our history and keeping us cleaving to the culture and keeping us steeped in our culture, that was the foundation for what was later to become Sounds of Blackness. I was blessed to go to Bryan Junior High School, which is now Sabathani Community Center and has been for 40 years, I think. Bryan Junior High School, also the high school of our late great brother Prince Rogers Nelson. But I remember my senior year at Central High School. There was a lot of interaction between the junior high school Bryant and the senior high school Minneapolis Central, because they were so physically close, in such close proximity. Academically, the music programs, the sports programs. And my senior year at Minneapolis Central, I started hearing these rumors about this guy down at Bryant who was a beast on every instrument. And lo and behold, the next thing we know, Prince was an international superstar. A Prince, a Jimmy Jam, a Terry Lewis, a Gary Hines, and ultimately a Sounds of Blackness didn't just evolve in a vacuum. We came from that rich Afrocentricity and wealth of music that we were blessed to be schooled and steeped and nurtured in. Senior year, Minneapolis Central, I was headed Ivy League. That is, until I talked to the late, great Earl Bowman, who was history teacher at Minneapolis Central and also football and track coach, and wound up at McAllister College as a dean. And after that conversation with him and the also late, great brother Harry Davis, they changed my mind from Dartmouth to McAllister. McAllister, a predominantly white institution of higher learning, embarked on a very ambitious program to recruit students of color in the late 60s called EEO, which stood for Expanded Educational Opportunities. And they were very successful in that effort. And there was this 50-voice choir called the McAllister College Black Voices under the direction of our emeritus founder, native of Beaumont, Texas, brother Russell Knighton. And Russell approached me about taking leadership of the group because, of course, he was going to be graduating soon. And I was honored to do that because they were already very excellent even at that time. But the vision that God gave me for the McAllister College Black Voices was to continue the tradition of Duke Ellington. Now that surprises a lot of people when I say that, because we hear Duke's name and we think of jazz, and we should. But too many people don't know that Duke also wrote, recorded, and performed spirituals, African music, blues, jazz, gospel, every sound of blackness. So Duke was a cultural ambassador as well as, to my mind, the greatest composer in the history of the planet. But he was a cultural ambassador as well. And so that's what the legacy was for Sounds of Blackness. We didn't invent that template to have as our repertoire jazz, blues, hip hop, R&B, African, world beat, and so forth. Duke Ellington established that legacy. And so that's why the name changed from McAllister College Black Voices to the Sounds of Blackness, every sound of the black music experience. One of the funniest things I'm frequently asked, did you guys, when you were students, did you ever even have an inkling that you would one day travel the world and win Grammys? And with all humbleness and modesty, the answer is yes. We would sit around after rehearsals at McAllister, in our youthful enthusiasm and say, you know what, one day we're gonna travel the world and do concerts and we're gonna win Grammys and we're gonna have our own airplane. Well, we still don't have our own airplane and we never will. But we believe that and we envision that. They say, that all things begin with a vision. From desire comes all things. Well, fast forward to 1990. Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis signed Sounds of Blackness as the first artists on their label, Perspective Records. Jam and Lewis, as well as Prince, had a relationship with Sounds and with yours truly that went back to the 70s. So it was not new. So when Prince emerged into his international stardom, he had us sing and open up tours at the old Met Center and all that, and come in and do the Batman soundtrack with him, starring Jack Nicholson. So they never forgot, and likewise for Jam and Lewis. The reason they signed Sounds of Blackness, and that was an issue in and of itself, because you have to remember Jam and Lewis were working with Human League, who was the #1 group in the world at the time, and Janet Jackson and Michael Jackson. And so when they were signed by A&M and Polygram Records with their own label, Perspective Records, No doubt Polygram and A&M thought that, okay, well, they're going to lure these people to their label, Janet and Michael and Human League. And so to their great surprise, they found out that the first artist that Jam and Lewis signed was this 40-voice ensemble called the Sounds of Blackness. And they were like, the Sounds are who? And how are we going to market them and all those things? But Jam and Lewis were unwavering in their commitment to Sounds of Blackness. They knew who we were, and the first thing they told me when they signed us was, Doc, and that's always been their nickname for me, Doc, don't change a thing. We want to present Sounds of Blackness to the world just the way you are. And they were true to this. So hats off to them, because usually the music industry is inclined to do the exact opposite and shape and mold you in their image and in the flavor of the day in terms of what's going on artistically. Jam and Lewis did the exact opposite, and we're forever grateful.
It's time, it's time, it's time. I know it's time. The generation of reparation. Pay up, time to pay up. Reparation. Right now, reparation. It's really ours, you know it's you. Pay up, time to pay up. Right now, reparation. Pay up, time to pay up.
The great Paul Robeson once said that all true artists have a responsibility to their people, and Sounds of Blackness have always taken that concept and those words very seriously. And so when George Floyd was murdered, lynched, 5 blocks from where we rehearsed at Sabathia Community Center, in the heart of the Southside Black community in Minneapolis, we knew that something needed to happen in terms of our movement, music. I'll never forget the first night of protests in light of George Floyd's murder. A young teenage Caucasian young lady came up to me, and she recognized me from the group. And she said, "Hey, Mr. Sounds of Blackness, I really like you guys. You're one of my favorite groups." And she said, "I know you guys are going to do a song about this, but please do me a favor. Don't make it a happy song." And I never forgot, I said, "Young lady, that's not going to happen." And right then, the words of Fannie Lou Hamer, "I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired," that she spoke at the '64 Democratic Convention in front of the whole world, talking about racism and brutality and injustice and inequality. Those words just wouldn't leave me alone, and I was up for a couple of nights writing Sick and Tired of Being Sick and Tired. So Sounds of Blackness protest music is not new. Our roots are in protest music. When we look at the 60s, the civil rights movement had We Shall Overcome. There's always been an anthem attached. The Black Power movement, late 60s, early 70s, had Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud. The Godfather of Soul, my favorite artist, James Brown. And so it dawned on me that this reparations movement also needed an anthem. We needed a current day anthem for this day and time. And Sick and Tired was addressing police brutality and those inequities and injustices. But specifically for reparations, we put it to the melody of Wade in the Water, which is subtext of Time for Reparations. We're wading in the water of reparations. God's going to trouble the water. We're going to stir this up as we demand reparations. And so that's not new. Sounds of Blackness back in the day sang "Take It From Me, We'll All Be Free," and "To Be Young, Gifted, and Black." All of those songs, we were rooted in protest music, and really this is just a return to our roots.